Before we start, hit subscribe and drop comment if you love these stories. All right, today's one is absolutely crazy. Let's dive in.
I didn't find out my marriage was ending during a fight. There was no shouting, no slam doors. It happened when my wife looked me in the eye and said, "Apologize to my son or I divorce you." Her son was 32, unemployed, living in the house I paid for. She thought I'd argue. She thought I'd explain. She thought I'd apologize to keep the peace. Instead, I said 3 words. "We're getting divorced." No anger, no hesitation. What she didn't understand was this. You can live without noise, but you can't live without respect. What followed wasn't revenge. It was paperwork, locked accounts, public records, and a grown man discovering that comfort ends the moment access does. Stay with me because this isn't a story about yelling back. It's about what happens when you stop negotiating with disrespect and let the system do the talking. Chapter 1. Everyone is an adult until the bills arrive. I woke before the alarm the way I always did. Not because I was anxious. Because habits are cheaper than therapy. My name's Marcus Blake, maintenance supervisor. Paid my bills on time. The coffee went on first, black, no argument. My boots waited by the door, toes angled out like they were already halfway gone. The house was quiet in that early morning way that feels earned, not borrowed. I stood there a moment, listening to the furnace cycle and the refrigerator hum, the small domestic machines doing their jobs without commentary. I like that. Machines that worked. People were harder. If you knew where to look, you could still see the scars on my knuckles. Most people didn't ask. They just adjusted their path in narrow hallways. I'd ridden hard once, hard enough to learn where that road ended. Prison or a hole in the ground. I took the off-ramp when I met my first wife and decided I wanted a life instead of a reputation. I kept the discipline and ditched the noise. That was the deal. Now I paid every bill in a house that felt less like mine every week. Derek was still asleep, which meant the morning was already productive for him. 32 years old and temporarily living with us, which in my experience meant indefinitely until the next argument produced a new definition. He slept late, ate early, and critiqued everything in between. Capitalism, ethics, the moral decay of management. He had a fluent vocabulary for injustice. He had less fluency when it came to rent. I poured the coffee and opened the mail. Envelopes stacked neatly because chaos is a choice. Electric, water, internet, insurance, bank. I flipped them over and did the math in my head the way you do when numbers stop being abstract and start feeling like weight. Responsibility arrives quietly, usually in envelopes, and it never asks how you're feeling. Derek shuffled and wearing yesterday's shirt in a confidence that hadn't earned its keep. He opened the pantry like it owed him money, poured cereal that cost more than it needed to, and leaned against the counter while I read. He watched me the way people watch documentaries they plan to disagree with. He said, mouthful, "This whole system is rigged. People are trapped in jobs that don't align with their values." I nodded once. It was easier than arguing with breakfast. He took that as encouragement. I refused to sell my soul. That's why I left. "You were fired," I said, still reading. "There's a difference." He laughed like I told a joke. "That's your generation talking. You guys think adulthood is about grinding yourself down." I finally looked at him. Just a glance. Long enough. Adulthood is due on the 18th. Paula came in then, already alert, already braced. She looked from Derek to me like a referee who'd picked a side before the whistle. "Can we not do this first thing in the morning?" "I'm not doing anything," I said. "True statements are calming." Derek scoffed. "See, this is the problem. You talk like you own everything." I took a sip of coffee. Bitter. Reliable. "I do," I said. "At least the parts with monthly statements." Paula's jaw tightened. "Marcus." Derek leaned forward, encouraged by the buffer. "You think paying bills makes you a hero? It doesn't. It just means you're trapped." I stacked the envelopes and slid them into my bag. "Trapped people don't have keys," I said. "They have excuses." He rolled his eyes. The universal gesture of someone who hadn't won but wanted credit for participation. "Whatever, man. Money isn't everything." "Agreed," I said. "But it keeps the lights on while you're finding yourself." Paula sighed like I'd committed a minor crime. You don't have to be so sharp. I'm being accurate, I said. Accuracy always did more damage than anger. Derek grinned. The kind meant to bait you into swinging so he could cry foul. You know, for a maintenance guy, you're pretty full of yourself. I set the bag down and met his eyes. Not long. Long enough. Maintenance owns the house you're standing in, I said. Commentary eats the food. The grin wobbled. That's enough. Paula snapped. I nodded once. Conversation over. I pulled on my jacket, the heavy one with the zipper that didn't care how you felt about winter. At the door, I paused. Not for them. For me, keys, wallet, phone, documents, order matters. Behind me, Derek kept talking. He always did. Words were his cardio. Paula tried to smooth it over, translating disrespect into concern. I didn't turn around. I never explained twice outside. The morning had teeth. I like that too. Cold tells the truth. I sat in the Ford for a moment and looked back at the house. Good bones. Solid. Paid for by showing up when it mattered. Derek believed adulthood was a mindset. I believed it was a ledger. I started the engine and pulled away. The world didn't end. It adjusted. Chapter 2. Temporary guests with permanent opinions. Derek discovered authority the way some men discover religion. Loudly, suddenly, and without credentials. He didn't own a single thing in the house, but he had opinions about all of it. The thermostat was always wrong. The coffee was burnt. The garage was a mess. Even though he'd never held a wrench longer than it took to complain about one, he conducted these critiques from the couch like it was a panel discussion, legs crossed, phone in hand, delivering TED Talks to no one who'd bought a ticket. I let him talk. Silence is a good filter. It lets people reveal how much air they're made of. One morning, I was lacing my boots when he watched me for a moment too long. The way people do when they think they're about to say something insightful. You know, he said casually superior. Routines like that are really just fear disguised as discipline. I finished the knot, stood up, and checked the weather out the window. Routines keep the lights on, I said. Then I grabbed my jacket. He frowned like the conversation had failed to applaud. Another time, I was fixing a cabinet hinge he'd yanked loose. Too much force, not enough patience. He leaned against the counter, arms folded, head tilted like he was watching a rerun. It's wild you're still doing maintenance at your age, he said. You ever think about doing something more impactful? I tightened the screw, tested the hinge. Solid. I let it open and close once just to be sure. This keeps the house standing, I said. Impact's overrated. He laughed, but it came out thin. Performative. Paula was nearby pretending to straighten a drawer that didn't need it. She shot me a look that meant I'd crossed some invisible line. That's when I noticed it. Derek only sharpened his tone when Paula was within earshot. Alone with me, he stayed polite, careful. Men who aren't afraid don't need an audience. The day he finally said it out loud. We were all in the kitchen. Paula was there. That mattered. Derek gestured around him like a tour guide. I mean, no offense, Marcus, he said, smiling in advance. But you're just maintenance. You don't really get how things should work. I looked at him once. Not long. Long enough. Maintenance owns this place. I said commentary. Sleeps in the spare room. He laughed like it was a joke. Paula didn't. That was harsh, she snapped. You don't have to humiliate him. I didn't, I said. I described the floor plan. Derek grinned wider, playing it off. But his eyes flicked to Paula, checking for cover. She gave it to him with a sigh that sounded suspiciously like approval. I went back to my coffee. I said what needed saying. I didn't explain twice. They kept talking after that. Words stacked on words. Accusations disguised as concern. Concern disguised as fairness. I listened just long enough to confirm what I already knew. Derek's courage was rented. Paula was paying the lease. When I left the room, the house settled. Tools stayed where I put them. Hinges worked. Nothing rattled. The noise followed me only as far as the hallway and then dropped off like it always did when there was nothing left to push against. I filed the observation away with the others. Patterns matter. Men who need permission aren't dangerous. Men who know when to stop talking are. Chapter 3. How to lose a job and call it integrity. Derek's job ended 3 different ways depending on the week. Sometimes he'd been laid off, corporate downsizing, nothing personal. Sometimes it was an ethical disagreement. He stood up to management and paid the price. Once, while reheating leftovers he hadn't paid for, he told Paula he'd refused to sell his soul. He said it slowly, confidently, like a man who'd practiced the line in the mirror and finally liked how it sounded. I listened the first time. I always do. Listening costs nothing and saves time later. We were in the living room when he launched into the latest version, pacing like he was giving sworn testimony. They wanted me to push garbage products on people who didn't need them, he said, voice full of conviction. I couldn't be part of that. Paula sat forward on the couch, eyes soft, already halfway to forgiveness. She nodded like integrity was contagious. I kept my eyes on the paper I was folding. Utility bill, priestesses straight, corners aligned, order matters. You didn't refuse anything, I said, not looking up. You were fired. There's a difference. The room went still, not peaceful, alert. The kind of quiet that happens right before someone decides to make noise. Derek stopped pacing and turned on me. That's not what happened. It is, I said. I folded the paper once more and set it on the stack. Explanation complete. He started in immediately, voice rising, sentences overlapping, every word trying to claw background he'd just lost. He called it a sabbatical. He called it a reset. He called it growth. None of those words paid rent. You don't know what you're talking about. He snapped. You weren't there. I was here, I said. Every day since. Paula stepped between us like a crossing guard who'd already chosen her side. Marcus, you don't have to be so dismissive, she said. He's going through something. I know, I said. He's unemployed. Derek laughed, sharp and ugly. You think money's everything? No, I said, but it's a reliable way to check the math on values. That landed. He felt it. You could see it in the way his smile stiffened. So he switched tactics. He turned to Paula. Smirk already loaded. This is what I mean, he said, jerking his thumb toward me. He talks like he's some authority just because he fixes machines. It's sad. I looked at him then, just once. Not long. Long enough. Machines break for reasons, I said. People tell stories. Paula snapped. Stop provoking him. I answered a question. I said true statements again. Dependable. Derek kept going louder now. Performing. He needed witnesses. He needed me to swing so he could duck and claim victory. I didn't give him that. I'd learned a long time ago that the fastest way to end a fight is to refuse to participate in the fantasy. I chose integrity over comfort, he declared, arms spread wide like he expected applause. I picked up my jacket, keys, wallet, phone sequence matters. Comfort chose you, I said. Integrity doesn't usually come with free housing. Paula gasped like I'd slapped him. Derek stared at me, waiting for more. Anger, threats, escalation. There wasn't any. I walked out to the garage. The smell of oil and metal settled me immediately. Tools hung where I'd put them. Nothing rattled. Nothing argued. They didn't reinterpret reality. They did what they were designed to do. And when they didn't, you fix them or replace them. Simple system. Honest. Inside the house, voices rose and fell. Derek angry. Paula soothing. A familiar rhythm. I tightened a bolt and tested it. Solid. Derek hated that I wouldn't snap. He wanted noise. He wanted spectacle. What he got was silence and a corrected record. That bothered him more than anger ever could. Chapter 4. The house where apologies were expected. The line got crossed on a Wednesday, which felt right. Wednesdays don't have patience for ceremony. I came home that evening with the cold still clinging to my coat and the smell of machine oil riding shotgun on my sleeves. Winter had settled in for good. The kind that presses against the windows like it's listening. The furnace was running steady. The lights were on. Too bright. That was the first clue. Derek was at the table scrolling his phone, feet hooked around the chair legs like he'd always belonged there. Paula stood by the counter with the mail spread out in a loose fan. One envelope was already open. Mine. The bank logo stared back at me, bold and familiar, like it had been waiting. I stopped just inside the doorway. Why is my mail open? Paula didn't look up. It's just statements. Derek snorted without lifting his eyes. He's asking like he doesn't already know. You're obsessed with money, man. Relax. I set my keys down slowly, not angry. Precise. That's not your concern. Derek leaned back, finally looking at me. Grin already chambered. Everything in this house is your concern. Bills, statements, control. It's like money is your whole personality. Derek, Paula said half-hearted. He waved her off. No, I'm serious. It's sad. You act like paying for things makes you important. I looked at the envelope again. Opened. Read. Handled by someone who hadn't earned the right. It makes things mine, I said. Derek laughed. Too quick. There it is. Always about ownership. His eyes drifted. Then past me, past Paula, to the shelf, to the photo. My father in his work jacket. Hands rough, eyes steady. A man who never talked big and never needed to. Derek tilted his head like he'd found a loose thread. That your old man, he said. Figures. Different time, different rules. Guys like that don't really matter anymore. He's gone. I stepped closer. Not fast, not slow, just enough that the air recalibrated. You don't talk about my father, I said. My voice stayed level. If you do, your mom will be spending a lot of money at the dentist. You understand me. I didn't raise my hands. I didn't crowd him. I didn't repeat myself. Men who've lived that life don't posture. They state facts and let the room decide whether it understands. Derek's smirk held for half a second longer than it should have. Then Paula moved. Marcus, she snapped, stepping between us like she was breaking up a bar fight. She didn't understand. That was completely out of line. Derek leaned back, relieved, protected. He'd gambled and thought he'd won. Paula turned on me, not him. Your tone, your rigidity. You always have to escalate. Why can't you just let things go? I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't asking for peace. She was asking for surrender. He insulted my father, I said. And you threatened my son. She shot back. Do you hear yourself? This is exactly the problem. You can't just swallow your pride for the sake of peace. That's when it landed. Clean and sharp. This house didn't expect respect. It expected compliance. Derek folded his arms, confidence restored. See, he said lightly, you always take things too far. I ignored him. He wasn't the conversation anymore. So, this is how it works, I said to Paula. He says whatever he wants. I apologize for reacting. That's peace. She exhaled hard. Already tired of the answer she knew she wasn't going to like. I just want to come home. Then stop charging apologies like rent, I said evenly. And make sure your grown son remembers he's a guest, not the landlord. Silence followed. Not the useful kind. The kind where everyone waits for someone else to clean up the mess they allowed. Derek broke it first. You owe me an apology. There it was. The expectation spoken out loud. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't negotiate. I looked around the kitchen, the counter I'd paid for, the lights I'd wired, the refrigerator humming on my dime, and finally understood the math. I nodded once, not agreement, acknowledgement. And in that moment, without raising my voice or making a scene, something final shifted. This wasn't about a line crossed. It was about a house that had decided silence was the price of entry. I stepped back, not retreat, assessment. Apologies were currency here. Respect wasn't accepted, and peace meant shutting up. I didn't say anything else. I didn't have to. The room kept breathing, but the house wasn't mine anymore. Chapter 5. Respect explained slowly. Derek decided the house was his the way some people decide facts. Confidently, loudly, and without evidence. We were in the living room. Paula was nearby, which meant Derek was warmed up and reckless. He gestured around him like a realtor who'd misplaced the paperwork. This is my mom's house, he said. As much as it's yours. I let the sentence sit. Not to build drama, just to see if it would collapse under its own weight. It didn't, so I corrected it. If this is your mom's house, I said, calm as a receipt. Why am I the one paying for it? Why am I the only one on the deed? And why are you hiding behind her at 32? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step closer. I didn't need to. Facts are efficient that way. Derek's face went red in stages, like a warning light running diagnostics before a system failure. He started talking faster, grabbing at words the way men do when they feel the ground moving under them. "You don't get it," he said, shaking his head. "This isn't about money. It's about respect, about family." He took a breath, recalibrated, tried again. "Money isn't everything, Marcus. That's your problem. You think paying bills gives you authority." I stayed quiet, let him keep digging. "I mean, seriously," he went on, forcing a laugh. "Too loud, too sudden. You act like this is some kind of scoreboard." The laugh hung there, unsupported. His eyes slid to Paula. Quick, practiced, checking for cover. "Right," he said to her. "That's all he ever cares about. Control." Paula stepped in immediately, voice sharp with protection disguised as fairness. "Marcus, stop pushing him. You don't have to humiliate him just to make a point." Derek nodded along, arms spreading now, encouraged. "Exactly. You're always trying to make me look small." I finally looked at him. "Not long. Long enough. If it hurts that much," I said, "then grow a pair. Leave this house and prove me wrong. Work for once instead of talking and hiding behind your mother's back." I didn't wait for an answer. There wasn't one worth hearing. Derek stared at me like I'd shut off the lights mid-sentence. Paula inhaled sharply, already loading the next accusation. I stayed where I was. Humiliation doesn't need repetition. "Marcus, that's enough." Paula snapped. "You're being cruel. You're trying to dominate him. This is toxic." I nodded once. Not agreement, recognition, protection, dressed up as parenting. It's a common costume. "He's humiliating me," Derek said louder now, reaching for volume because substance had left the room. I didn't answer him. I'd already said what needed saying. Former bikers learn early. You don't explain boundaries to people who profit from crossing them. You set them once and watch who trips. Paula kept going, listing my failures in a tone that sounded compassionate and landed like prosecution. "You always have to win. You can't just let things be." I glanced at the wall clock. Second hand steady. Machines do what they're built to do. "I'm not trying to win," I said. "I'm stating facts." That didn't help. It never does. Derek laughed again. Sharp and desperate. "Hear that? He thinks he owns everything." I didn't correct him this time. Explaining twice turns facts into debate, and I don't debate reality. Silence took the room by the shoulders. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that makes people keep talking so they don't have to listen to themselves. Paula filled it. Derek followed. Accusations, labels, moral fog. I stayed still. I could feel the line coming before it arrived. The moment when clarity threatens the story everyone's invested in. When that happens, someone always reaches for a weapon that sounds reasonable. I didn't move. I didn't argue. I let the noise exhaust itself. Respect, it turns out, doesn't need volume. It needs borders. And once you draw them, the people who hate them tell you everything you need to know. Chapter 6. My wife issued an ultimatum. The moment arrived without ceremony. No drum roll, no warning flare. "Apologize to my son right now," Paula said. Each word clipped and careful like she'd practiced it in the mirror. "Or we're getting a divorce." The room did what it always did when ultimatum showed up. It waited. The refrigerator hummed. The clock over the stove ticked like it had an opinion. Derek's smile widened just a fraction, already counting the win. "We're getting a divorce," I said. No pause, no change in tone. I didn't look at Derek. I didn't need to. I watched Paula's face instead. The blink, the recalculation, the moment her certainty stalled like a car refusing to turn over in winter. "That's not what she started." "It is," I said. Derek laughed once, quick and nervous, like he'd misheard a punchline. "Come on, man. Don't be dramatic." I picked up my jacket from the chair and slid my keys into my pocket. Wallet, phone, the folder from the hall drawer, the one with originals, not copies. Sequence matters. "This isn't drama," I said. "It's logistics." Paula's voice rose, panic creeping in around the edges. "You can't just after 9 years. "Can't," I said. "And I will." Derek stepped forward, the smile wobbling now, recalculating. You're really gonna blow up your marriage over an apology? I met his eyes for the first time that night. Just long enough. You confused an apology with obedience. I said, "That's on you." Paula shook her head, breath quickening. "Marcus, please let's talk about this." "We already did." I said, "You finished the sentence." I moved down the hallway and opened the coat closet. My duffel waited where I'd left it, half-packed from a work trip. That never happened. I slung it over my shoulder. The weight felt right. Derek followed louder now. "You can't just walk out." I stopped at the door. "Not for effect. Precision matters." "You'll be served with notice," I said. "Both of you pack what's yours?" Paula stared at me like the language had shifted without warning. "You're serious?" "Yes." Derek scoffed, grasping for ground. "You think you're tough?" I looked at him flat. "Yes." Outside, the night was clean and cold. It did what nights do. Accepted decisions without commentary. I shut the door behind me and felt the latch catch. Inside, voices spiked and tangled. Confusion, scrambling to catch up with consequence. We refinanced the house 4 years earlier, lower rate, cleaner paperwork. Paula signed without reading much. We trusted each other. Then I walked to the Ford, tossed the bag in the back, and sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel. Through the window, I could see them moving, shapes crossing and recrossing like a play that had lost its script. Derek's confidence had nowhere to land. Paula's certainty had nowhere to stand. I started the engine and pulled away. No horns, no speeches. The world adjusted. Chapter 7. Then we were done. Revised. The morning after felt quieter than it should have. Like the world was waiting for instructions. The motel room smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. The kind of place that didn't ask questions and didn't remember faces. I didn't rush it. I shaved, drank my coffee black. Watched the steam rise and vanish on its own. Habit is a form of order. Order keeps things from spiraling. At 10 sharp, I didn't call Mr. Thornton. I wanted to see him. His office sat above a hardware store in Springfield, which felt appropriate. You went there when things needed fixing, and you didn't want an audience. Narrow stairs, no receptionist smile, just a door, a desk, and a man who waited for facts instead of feelings. We shook hands once and sat. "No speeches today?" he asked, already opening a folder. "Not my style," I said. I laid it out clean. What was said, what was demanded, what I accepted. He didn't interrupt. He asked precise questions and waited for precise answers. Dates, signatures, occupancy, accounts. I answered the way I always did. Short, factual, complete. That's why I hired him. He read, turned a page. "Not at once." "All right," he said. "No drama, just confirmation." By the end of the meeting, financial access was restricted, occupancy clarified, and paperwork queued like a clean row of dominoes waiting for a finger. Notice drafted, timeline set. No theatrics procedure doing what it was designed to do. "The house is yours," Thornton said, tapping the deed. "Always has been." "I know," I said. "And if your wife wants to go legal," he added, almost pleased. "Good. Meet in public. Never behind closed doors. Public strip stories down to size." I nodded. He slid the folder back to me. "You handled this correctly." "I know," I said again, and stood outside. The morning moved on like nothing important had happened, which was fine. Important things rarely announced themselves. I drove back mid-morning, not to reconcile. To conclude, Paula and Derek were in the kitchen talking fast, voices overlapping like they could drown something out if they piled on enough sound. They stopped when I walked in. Silence always shows up late to arguments. "I spoke with my attorney," I said. "I didn't sit. I didn't take my jacket off. This is procedural." Derek scoffed immediately. "Oh, here we go. Power move." "No," I said. "I'm in confusion." Paula crossed her arms, already shaking her head. "You didn't even give us time to talk." "We talked." I said. "You issued terms. I accepted them. I set the envelope on the counter, not slid set." "Derek," I said, "you need to leave within 10 days. You're not a tenant. You never were." His face flushed. "You can't just throw me out." "I can't." I said. "And I will." Paula stepped forward. Marcus, this is betrayal. After everything, you'll receive formal notice, I said, turning to her. You have a lawful time frame to vacate. Mr. Thornton's office will handle the details. Derek laughed sharp and brittle. This is manipulation. You're trying to control everything. I nodded once. Control would have been arguing, I said. This is enforcement. Paula's voice cracked. You're really doing this? Yes. They stared at me like the floor had shifted and no one announced it. Derek paced, hands in his hair, muttering about lawyers and rights and how unfair this was. Paula stayed still, eyes fixed on the envelope like it might change its mind if she watched hard enough. No one yelled. No one cried. The absence of drama confused them more than anger ever could. I took a step back toward the door. I'll be gone for the afternoon, I said. When I get back, I expect progress. Derek opened his mouth, closed it. Paula said my name once like it used to mean something different. I didn't answer. Outside, the day went on like it always did. Cars passed. A dog barked. Somewhere, a lawn-mower coughed to life. I sat in the Ford for a moment and thought about the old rules I'd learned writing. Rules that kept you alive if you followed them and buried you if you didn't. Never bluff. Never beg. Never explain twice. I pulled away without looking back. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't managing chaos. I was ending it. Chapter 8. A 32-year-old man and his mother's purse. Derek learned about adulthood in pieces. The first piece arrived at a gas station late afternoon under fluorescent lights that buzzed like they were bored with him. He slid the card. The machine chirped back a refusal. He tried again, slower this time, like patience might earn respect. Didn't. The clerk gave him that look, polite, practiced, already finished with the interaction. Derek reacted like the pump had insulted his bloodline. Try it again, he said, voice rising, tapping the card against the counter as if threatening it might help. The clerk didn't argue. Systems don't argue. They wait. I'd restricted secondary cards 2 days earlier, quietly just in case. The second piece arrived an hour later at a sporting goods store. Same card, same result, different audience. Derek's voice went up another notch, explaining to no one how systems fail people like him. The cashier nodded the way people do when they've learned not to engage. Eventually, silence won. He called his mother first. That was predictable. Paula panicked the way panic always travels fastest. Straight through the purse. She called me less than a minute later. I answered once. Marcus, she said, breathless, already sprinting past the facts. Something's wrong. Derek's card just declined. He's at a gas station. People are staring. This is humiliating for him. I didn't say anything right away. I could hear traffic behind her. Horns, movement. The sound of a problem she assumed I'd fix out of habit. Can you just unlock it? She asked. This has to be some mistake. It isn't, I said. There was a pause. Short, uncomfortable. What do you mean it isn't? He tried to use money that isn't his. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear her recalibrating. Marcus, she said carefully. He's my son. He is not my son, I said. She inhaled sharply. That's not what I meant. It's what you expect, I replied. Her voice tightened. So, you're just going to leave him stranded? He's an adult, I said. Adults solve problems without calling their mothers. In the background, I could hear Derek now, loud, angry, performing for whoever was within earshot. Paula lowered the phone and spoke to him, then came back flustered. He's upset, she said. He says you're doing this to punish him. I'm doing this to stop it, I said. Stop what? She demanded. Access. Silence settled between us. Thick, unfamiliar. She tried again, softer this time. He's under a lot of stress. I know, I said. You've been paying for it. She didn't respond. There was nothing left that wouldn't sound like begging, and she knew it. Derek took the phone from her. I heard the shift immediately, the false calm, the borrowed confidence he used when he thought volume equaled leverage. You think this makes you powerful? He said, cutting me off like this. No, I said it makes things accurate. You're embarrassing me in public. You embarrassed yourself? I said the machine just told the truth. He launched then. Financial abuse, control, disrespect. Big words borrowed from smaller men. I waited until he ran out of breath. When you're done talking, I said, find a way home that doesn't involve my accounts. I ended the call. I didn't block the number. I didn't need to. Panic only works when someone answers it. I set the phone face down and finished what I was doing. Pride, I reflected, has an overdraft limit, and Derek had finally hit his. He left a voicemail anyway. Long, desperate, full of words he thought still mattered. I listened to the first few seconds, just enough to confirm it was noise, then set the phone face down again. I'd heard tougher men say worse things for less. This didn't rate. Chapter 9. Unauthorized transactions. I learned Derek didn't stop trying. He tried the way men do when they confuse persistence with permission. The alerts came in clean and impersonal. The kind of language machines use when they're doing their jobs correctly. A withdrawal attempt. Declined. Another moments later, declined again. Then an insurance inquiry tied to a whole number that wasn't mine declined. Each notification landed quietly. No judgment, no emotion, just accuracy. Years ago, back when I still believed preparation was pessimism, I'd put those safeguards in place. Turns out pessimism is just realism with paperwork. The reason showed up before the explanation did. A used fishing boat, decent size, good deal according to Derek. Shared funds according to him. He tried to run it through anyway. The system disagreed. The transaction flagged. The accounts froze. Pinning authorization. Paula called first. Panic makes people fast. Something's wrong, she said, already breathless. The accounts locked. Derek was trying to buy a boat and everything just stopped. A boat? I repeated. Yes, she said quickly, already defending it. It was a good price. He was just trying to get back on his feet. He tried to use shared funds without authorization, I said. That triggers a review. Her tone sharpened. So authorize it. No. The pause that followed was short but stunned. Marcus, this is ridiculous. He needs transportation. He needs something to do. He needs income, I said. Derek took the phone from her. I could hear wind in the background, his pacing, the performance loading like a program he'd used before. Fix it, he said. You can't just lock people out of their own money. It isn't your money, I said. You're doing this on purpose, he snapped. This is some kind of power move. No, I said it's a boundary. He cursed. Paula grabbed the phone back. Breath tight now. Anger leaking through the panic. If you don't unlock this, she said, I'll have to talk to a lawyer. Good, I said. We should do this publicly. Silence. The kind that happens when someone realizes the threat didn't land. I'm not discussing this privately anymore. I continued. If you want to challenge it, do it legally. She didn't answer. Derek did, shouting now, listing injustices, humiliation, how I was ruining his life over a boat. I waited until the noise burned itself out. I'm not authorizing anything, I said. That's final. I ended the call. That afternoon, I hired Samuel Porter. Not for drama, for documentation. Porter worked clean. No commentary, no theories, just confirmation. Derek hadn't been honest about the firing. No ethical stand, no principled exit, performance issues tied to financial misconduct. Warnings documented, limits crossed, termination finalized. After that came the searches. Boats, trailers, gear, insurance quotes, no applications, no interviews, toys, not jobs. Porter's report was thin. Facts don't need padding. Paula called again that night, voice brutal now, worn down by reality. You need to undo whatever you did, she said. This is tearing us apart. I didn't do anything, I said. Then why is everything frozen? I stopped pretending, I said. She tried emotion, then fairness, then history. None of it moved the system. Systems don't respond to tone. The account stayed locked. The house went quiet. Chaos, deprived of fuel, burned out on its own. I set the phone face down and made dinner. The stove heated evenly. The timer worked. Machines behaved exactly as designed. And for the first time since this started, the silence didn't feel empty. Felt earned. Chapter 10. Paperwork does not argue back. Mr. Thornton's office sat above a hardware store in Springfield. Narrow stairs. No receptionist smile. Just a door, a desk, and a man who waited for facts instead of feelings. It was the kind of place you went when something needed fixing and you didn't want applause. We shook hands once and sat. He opened a folder. I opened nothing. No raised voices today, he said, almost conversational. Not my style, I replied. He slid documents across the desk, aligning the edges as he went. Deed, refinance, signatures, dates. Everything laid out cleanly like a table set for a meal no one was going to enjoy. The house is yours, he said. Sole ownership always has been since the refinance. I nodded. The protections are enforceable, he continued. Clear language, no ambiguity, I nodded again. And your wife signed everything voluntarily, he said, tapping the page lightly. No coercion, no misrepresentation. She acknowledged each section. I watched the paper. Ink doesn't raise its voice. Ink remembers. She's talking about going legal, I said. Assumes I'll back down. Thornton's mouth twitched. Not a smile. Approval. Good, he said. I looked at him. When people threaten legal action, he continued. It's usually because they think emotion still counts. It doesn't. He folded his hands. If she wants to talk, we talk in public. Mediation, court, anywhere with a record. Not behind closed doors. Why? I asked. Because you have the high ground, he said simply. Facts, signatures, timeline. You don't need to persuade anyone. You just need to show up. He turned another page. She assumed marriage meant shared control. Assumptions aren't binding, I said. He smiled once. Quick, professional contracts tend to agree with you. I asked questions. Short ones. Occupancy timelines, access limits, notice requirements. He answered without commentary. This was hierarchy done right. Each role clear, each step respected. I'd learned that kind of structure a long time ago, back when mistakes got expensive fast. I didn't miss the biker life. I missed the discipline. Turns out I'd kept it. Thornton explained how things would move from here, what I needed to do, what I didn't, where silence worked better than response. He never told me how I felt. He told me what was doesn't care who yelled first, he said almost as an aside. I almost smiled. When we were done, he slid the folder back to me. You're on solid ground, he said. Let them come to you. I know, I replied and stood. Outside the street was busy in the small-town way. People pretending nothing important was happening anywhere. I like that important things don't need witnesses. Paperwork isn't dramatic. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't beg. It just waits. And when it moves clean. I'd learned a long time ago that the most effective tools are quiet. Chapter 11. Public is a wonderful place for private lies. The courthouse smelled like paper, old wood, and damp coats drying without permission. Nothing personal survived long in a room like that. Stories came in loud and left smaller. Paula sat 2 seats away from me, hands folded too tightly in her lap, knuckles pale like they were bracing for impact. Derek leaned forward beside her, restless, dressed like confidence might count if it was pressed well enough. Mr. Thornton nodded once when he arrived. No greeting. We were past that. When it started, no one raised their voice. They didn't need to. Public rooms do the work for you. Paula went first. She folded her hands, unfolded them, then folded them again as if the right arrangement might unlock the right words. I never meant for this to go so far, she said carefully. Practiced. I trusted my husband. I trusted our marriage. I assumed certain things were understood. The mediator's pin rested on the page, such as that we were partners, Paula said. That decisions were shared, that what was his was also mine. She glanced at me. I didn't return it. And the documents you signed? The mediator asked. Paula hesitated. Just a beat too long. I didn't think I needed to read every line. We'd always handled things that way. The pen didn't move. Derek leaned in before the silence could settle. He never liked silence. This didn't happen in a vacuum, he said. I was under a lot of pressure. My job situation was complicated. How so? The mediator asked. I refused to compromise my values, Derek said quickly. And then suddenly I'm out. That messes with you. Anyone would need a reset. They reset like the boat, the mediator asked. Derek blinked. It was an investment, he said. Something to get back on my feet and the funds used, the mediator asked. They were shared, Derek said, confidence creeping back in. Family money. The mediator finally looked at me. Mr. Blake, I didn't stand. I slid the folder across the table. Those are the documents, I said. In order. Pages turned. Quiet filled the room. Documents don't interrupt themselves. After a moment, the mediator looked up. Mrs. Blake, she said. Did you read what you signed? Paula opened her mouth. Closed it. Tried again. I trusted him. That wasn't the question, the mediator said evenly. Did you read them? The pause that followed answered it. Derek broke the silence, sharp and accusatory. He planned this, he said, pointing at me. He set all this up to control everything. I met his eyes. Calm, no heat. I planned to be responsible, I said. You planned to be comfortable. The room understood the difference. The mediator nodded once like something had finally aligned. All right, she said, closing the folder. Based on the documentation and the timeline presented. Here's how this proceeds. She turned a page. Account access will remain restricted pending formal separation. No further transactions without written authorization. Derek shifted in his seat. That's not fair. I didn't even get to explain. You did, the mediator said without looking up multiple times. She continued. Occupancy will follow the notice already issued. Mr. Stevens is to vacate immediately. Mrs. Blake will vacate within the lawful time frame previously outlined. Paula's voice thinned. You're just deciding this now. I'm confirming it. The mediator said the documents decided it earlier. Derek leaned forward, palms flat on the table. So that's it. He just wins. The mediator finally looked at him. This isn't a contest, Mr. Stevens. It's compliance. Derek had walked in confident, shoulders back. Jaws said, like the room owed him something. He was quieter now. Each assumption collapsed in order. The house, the money, the leverage, the speech he'd rehearsed on the drive over. He searched for gaps that weren't there. When none appeared, he tried volume. This is bullshit, he snapped, shoving his chair back. You can't just, sir, the bailiff said, already moving. Derek turned, still mid-sentence. I'm talking. No. The bailiff replied evenly. You're done. That was it. No warning. No threat. One sentence. The smirk didn't disappear because Derek was angry. It disappeared because it no longer mattered. Loudness had finally met a boundary that didn't explain itself. I watched without satisfaction. The bailiff accomplished in 6 words what I'd avoided for years. Derek sat back down, smaller now, hands on his knees like a kid, waiting for instructions. Confidence drained out of him, leaving nothing underneath worth defending. This wasn't punishment. It was exposure. Derek wasn't losing something. He was being revealed. The mediator flipped another page. Cost associated with unauthorized transaction attempts and the resulting review will be assigned where misuse occurred. Paula's head snapped up. You're saying we're responsible? I'm saying the record is, the mediator replied. Intent doesn't override signatures. Silence followed. Heavy but clean. Derek shook his head slowly. This is unbelievable. No, the mediator said. This is documented. She slid the folder back toward Mr. Thornton. We're done here. Chairs moved. Papers gathered. People stood the way they do when something ends without applause. I stayed seated a moment longer. No reason to rush clarity. Consequences didn't care who felt wronged. They didn't adjust for tone or volume. They didn't negotiate. They just arrived on time and stayed. Outside, the air was cold and honest. I breathed it in and felt lighter than I expected. It turns out you don't need to defend yourself when the truth is allowed to speak uninterrupted. Public is a wonderful place for private lies. Chapter 12. Garbage night comes early. The house went quiet in stages. The way storms leave. First the noise, then the debris. Derek left first. Boxes, not bags. Too many for someone who'd insisted he was only crashing for a bit. He moved fast. Aggressive efficiency like speed might turn departure into defiance. Tape ripping, cardboard scraping walls. The soundtrack of someone pretending momentum is dignity. He didn't say much. That surprised me. Men like Derek usually need an exit monologue. At the door, struggling with an overpacked box, he finally looked at me, then didn't. His eyes slid past my shoulder like I was a coat rack. "You didn't have to do it like this," he muttered. I didn't answer. Explanations were a luxury he'd already spent. He adjusted his grip and headed down the steps. Confidence doesn't survive cardboard. The neighbors pretended not to notice. Mrs. Patterson across the street watered a patch of frozen lawn that didn't need it. A pickup idled too long down the block. Engine humming like it had opinions. Small-town courtesy has excellent peripheral vision. Paula followed later. Quieter, smaller somehow. She packed what was hers with care. Folding clothes that didn't need folding. Aligning shoes that were already paired like order might soften the landing. She paused in doorways, fingers brushing walls she hadn't noticed while she lived inside them. Finality does that. It makes people inventory the past. At the kitchen counter, she stopped, hand resting on the edge. "I never thought it would end like this," she said. I kept my eyes on the floor where the rug used to be. "Most things don't," I said. She waited for more. There wasn't any. "I hope you're happy," she said finally. "I hope you're done," I replied. That landed harder than anything louder would have. I didn't help. I didn't watch. I didn't comment. When the last box cleared the threshold, I closed the door and locked it. Then I changed the locks. Hardware store receipt still warm in my pocket. Fresh pins, clean turn of the key. Territory is a simple thing when you respect it. The phrase people repeated later. Time to take the garbage out was never shouted. It wasn't for an audience. I said it once, low and final to an empty room while the trash bin waited at the curb. Thursday nights don't negotiate. Inside, the house looked bigger, cleaner, counters clear, closets breathing again. You don't realize how much space noise takes until it leaves. I took the bin to the curb and rolled it back. The lid closed with a solid, satisfied thump. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere a TV laughed for no reason. I stood in the doorway a moment longer than necessary, listening to nothing argue back. When I turned off the light, the house kept its shape. And for the first time in a long while, so did I. Chapter 13. Peace without negotiation. The next morning felt different. Not dramatic, just settled. Like the house had accepted new instructions and was done asking questions. The locks worked the way they were supposed to. Clean, certain, no hesitation, no rattle. The furnace kicked on when it should. The refrigerator hummed without complaint. Systems behave better when no one is trying to override them. I walked the house slowly, not inspecting, confirming. Counters clear, closets empty. The spare room quiet, stripped of borrowed opinions and second-hand certainty. The place looked bigger without noise in it. Houses, like men, hold their shape better when they aren't crowded by excuses. I set my boots by the door where they'd always belonged. Put the coffee maker back on the counter. No ceremony. Order returns fastest when you don't announce it. That night I slept in my own bed, not because I needed to, because I could. The ceiling fan hummed steady. The furnace clicked on and off like it had a job, and intended to keep it. I slept straight through until morning. The kind of sleep that doesn't ask for explanations. Work stayed the same. Machines broke for understandable reasons. Both wore out. Bearings failed. You fixed what was worn and moved on. Machines don't hold grudges. They don't test boundaries. They just respond to attention. On Saturday night, I went back to the VFW. Same table, same bad jokes, same coffee that tasted like it had stories. Carlos slid a beer across the table without ceremony. He studied my face like he was checking a gauge. "Quiet now?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. He nodded. That was the whole conversation. I didn't hate Paula. Hate takes energy and I don't fund things that don't pay out. I didn't resent Derek either. Resentment is just debt with better branding. I closed that account. One night, I stood in the kitchen with the lights off and listened to nothing. No apologies demanded. No ultimatums waiting to be issued. No one mistaking peace for surrender. Just quiet, holding its ground. That's when it's settled. Peace isn't compromised with disrespect. It's the absence of people who require you to swallow yourself. I didn't win. I didn't need to. I stayed. Thanks for watching Marcus's story. Was he right to end his marriage over the ultimatum? Or should he have found middle ground with Paula and Derek? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories. See you in the next one.